And so, in fact, the one new feature of C we'll introduce today is one that actually allows us to implement our very own data structures. You can think of arrays as a very lightweight data structure in that it allows you to cluster related data back to back to back to back. And this is how strings are implemented. They are a data structure effectively implemented with an array. But with C and with other languages, it turns out you can invent your own data types, whether they're one-dimensional, two-dimensional even, or beyond. And with C, can you specifically create your own types that have their own names? So for instance, wouldn't it have been nice if C came with not just char and int and float and long and others? Wouldn't it be nice if C came with a data type called person? And ideally, a person would have a name and a number. Now, that's a little naive and unrealistic. Like, why would they define a person to have just those two fields? Certainly, people could have disagreed what a person is. So they leave it to us. Like, the authors of C gave us all of these primitives, ints and floats and strings and so forth. But it's up to us now to use those in a more interesting way so that we can create an array of person variables, if you will, inside of an array called people, just to pluralize it here. So how are we going to do this? Well, for now, let's just stipulate that a person in the world will have a name and a number. That we could argue all day long what else a person should have, and that's fine. You can invent your own person eventually. At the moment, I'm using just two variables to define a person's name and number. But wouldn't it be nice to encapsulate, that is, combine these two data types into a new and improved data type called person? And the syntax for that is going to be this. So it's a bit of a mouthful, but you can perhaps infer what some of this is doing here. So it turns out C has a keyword called typedef. As the name kind of suggests, this allows you to define your own type. Struct is an indication that it's a structure. It's like a structure that has multiple values inside of it that you are trying to define. And then at the very bottom here, outside of the curly braces, is the name of the type that you want to create. So you don't have discretion over using typedef or struct in this particular case, but you can name the thing whatever you want. And you can put anything in the structure that you want as well. And as soon as this semicolon is executed at the bottom of the code, every line thereafter can now have access to a person data type, whether as a single variable or as an entire array. So if I want to build on this then, let me go ahead and do this. Let me go back to my C code here, and I'm going to go ahead and change just a couple of things. Let's go ahead and do this. I'm going to go ahead and first get rid of those two hard-coded arrays. And let me go ahead and at the top of my file, invent this type. So typedef struct. Inside of it will be a string name and then a string number. And then the name of this structure will be person. And best practice would have me define it at the very top of my file so that any of my functions, in fact, could use it, even though I just have main in this case. Now, if I wanted, I could do this, like person p1 and person p2. But we know from last week, like that already is bad design. If you want to have multiple instances of the same type of variable, we should probably use what instead? An array. So let me not even go down that road. Let me instead just do this. Person will be the type of the array, but I'm going to call it, I could call it persons, but in English we typically say people. So I'll call the array people, and I want two people to exist in this array, though I could certainly change that number to be anything I want. How now do you put a name inside of a person and then put the number inside of that same person? Well, slightly new syntax today. I'm going to go ahead and say this. People bracket 0 just gives me the first person in the array. That's not new. But if you want to go inside of that person in memory, you use a dot, and then you just specify the name of the attribute therein. So if I want to set the first person's name to Carter, I just use that so-called dot notation. And then if I want to set Carter's number using dot notation, I would do this, +1 617 495 1000. And then if I want to do the same for myself, I would now do people bracket 1 dot name equals quote unquote David. And then people bracket 1 still dot number equals quote unquote +1 949 468 2750. And now, at the bottom of my file, I think my logic can pretty much stay the same. I can still, on this line here, prompt the user for the name of the person they want to look up. For now, even though I admit it's not the best design, I'm just doing this for demonstration's sake, I'm going to leave the 2 there because I know I have 2 people. But down here, this is going to have to change. I don't want to compare names bracket I anymore. What do I want to type here as the first argument to stir compare? What do I want to do here? Yeah. So people I.name. Yeah, so I want to go into the people array at the ith location, because that's what my loop is doing. It's updating I again and again, and then look at name. And that's good. I think now I need to change this too. What do I want to print if the person is found? Someone else? What do I want to print here if I found the person's name? Yeah. Say a little louder. Perfect. So people bracket I dot number, if indeed I want to print the corresponding number to this person. And then I think the rest of my code can stay the same. So let me go ahead and rerun make phone book to recompile this version. So far, so good. /phone book. Let's go ahead and type in Carter's name, found. All right, let's go ahead and run it again. David's name, found. Let's go ahead and run it one more time. So type in John Harvard, for instance, not found in this case. So fundamentally, the code isn't all that different. Linear search is still behaving the same way. And I admit this is kind of ugly looking. Like we've kind of made a 2-line solution like 5 lines of code now. But if we fast forward a week or 2, when we start saving information to files, we'll introduce you to files like CSV files, comma separated values, or spreadsheet files, which you've surely opened on your Mac or PC at some point in the past. Suffice it to say, we'll soon learn techniques for storing information like names and numbers in files. And at that point, we're not going to do any of this hackish sort of hard coding of the number 2 and manually typing my name and Carter's name and number into our program. We'll read the information dynamically from a file. And in a few weeks, we'll read it dynamically from a database instead. But this is, for now, just syntactically how we can create an array of size 2 containing 1 person each. We can update the name and number of the first person, update the name and the number of the second person, and then later search across those names and print out the corresponding numbers. And in this sense, this is a better design. Why? Because my person data type encapsulates now everything that it means to be a person, at least in this narrow world. And if I want to add something to the notion of a person, for instance, I could go up to my typedef and tomorrow add an address to every person and start reading that in as well. And now it's not the honor system. It's not a names array, a numbers array, an addresses array, and everything else you might imagine related to a person. It's all encapsulated, which is a term of art, inside of the same type. Reminiscent, if some of you have programmed before, of something called object-oriented programming, but we're not there yet. C is not that. Questions on this use of struct or this new syntax? The dot operator being really the juicy part here. Any questions? Yeah? On what line number? 16? So yes, so syntactically, we introduced the square brackets last week. So doing people bracket 0 just means go to the first person in the array. That was like when Stephanie literally opened this door. That's doors bracket 0. But this is, of course, people bracket 0 instead. Today, the dot is a new piece of syntax. It means go inside of that person in memory and look at the name therein and set it equal to Carter and do the same for number. So that's all. It's like open the locker door, go inside of it, and check or set the name and the number. Yeah? Attributes is fine. Good question. In the struct, can you set default values? Short answer, no. And this is where C becomes less featureful than more modern languages like Python and Java and others, where you can, in fact, do that. So when we transition to Python in a few weeks' time, we'll see how we can start solving problems like that. But for now, it's up to you to initialize name and number to something. Yeah? Really good question. How can we adjust or critique the design of what I'm doing? This is one of the few situations where I would say hypocritically, do as I say, not as I do. I am using pretty ugly lines like this just to introduce the syntax. But my claim pedagogically today is that eventually when we start storing names and numbers or other things in files or in databases, you won't have this redundancy. You'll have one line of code or two lines of code that read the information from the file or database and then fill the entire array with that data. For now, I'm just doing it manually so as to keep our focus only on the new syntax. But that's it. So forgive the bad design by design today. Other questions on this? All right. That's been a lot already. Why don't we go ahead and take our 10-minute break with snacks first? We have some delightful brownies in the lobby.